And we're going to be continuing today in the 15th book of Yisrayl. 15th book of Yisrayl, chapter 3. 15th book of Yisrayl, chapter 3. That's on page 17. And it's a sermon that was given on January, on 1/17/2015. And it's, come and I will show you the sentence of the city that sits on 7 hills. And of course, we know through prophecy which city it is and who it is that rules that city and what this great whore does that sits in this city and what she does and who she rules over. And Pastor was alluding to that one of the last times that he spoke here. But we're going to start off here and on page 17 here, and Pastor shows here in verse 2, he says, as you saw in the news there, and it's very important, men, that we do keep an eye on the news. You know, there's a lot of garbage that's in the news, a lot of stuff that tries to pass itself off as news, and this is why the House of Yahweh goes through great lengths to scour through all of this and to filter through the things that that really don't mean a whole lot, but they show us the things the things that are coming to pass in fulfillment of prophecy. And this is so that we can have our own faith and our own trust, and we can prove these things. Yahweh says to prove him. And Pastor has mentioned many times in the past that fulfilled prophecy proves all things. And this is how we see prophecy fulfilled. We can see it in the news. And Pastor shows here, he says, there are some great things taking place. And this global warming I'm convinced that this is going to be the warm-up. I like how he used that, the warm-up to the real global warming. And of course, Pastor there is talking about it's talking about this great nuclear burning that's going to be brought on by mankind's sin. And this is all part of a lesson. We got to remember, men, that this is all part of a lesson that Yahweh is teaching mankind, is that you cannot live without my laws. There is no way that you can have peace without my laws, and the violation of these laws will bring this destruction. It's going to bring this great nuclear burning. And this is all brought about, everything we see, all the sickness and disease and the wars and everything that we see going on in the world, all the bitterness and hatred and all these things is brought on by sin. And Pastor shows here, he says, this is what's going to be the lead into nuclear wars. And then over in verse 5, he says, the world's hope is all gone. It's gone. They have no hope. They're grasping at straws. He says they're turning from God to the Pope now. Oh boy, can you read that? There is no God. And there's actually there were some billboards that Pastor was showing us. Oh, come on. Well, technology is great when it works, but when it gives you a fit. Okay. This is an example of some of the billboards that were being seen. In the beginning, man created God. And it says there's probably no God. You can see they don't even know for sure. They've got doubts themselves. But look at what they're pushing. Now stop worrying, enjoy your life. In other words, just do whatever you want to do. Don't worry about any consequences. Stop worrying about it. And enjoy your life. And then this one here says, Dear Santa, all I want for Christmas is a skip church. I'm too old for fairy tales. Well, not realizing that the very act of following Christmas is embedded. I mean, there are multiple, references to following many different gods in those traditions. And you can see, you can see the confusion, the confusion of the mind. And that's just another one there. In the beginning, man created God. So they try, what they do is they try to marginalize the scriptures. In other words, they try to put them down. There was a class that I went to, not a class that I went to, but there was a class that was offered in the university that I went to, and it was called the Bible as Literature. And they were looking at all of the accounts, all of the prophets, all of the the different historical accounts in the book of Yahweh, in the Holy Scriptures, they were looking at them as the same thing as like Aesop's fables. But this is all part of trying to get the people to turn from the laws that are written in the Scriptures. Man, it's only the laws in the Scriptures, as Pastor shows in here, that's going to stop all this mess that we see going on. They said that they're turning from God to the Pope now. Well, this here, if you remember, we covered this in the book Mark of the Beast here a few weeks ago. This is the Lord of heaven or her representative. Now, this is the triple crown of the Pope. This is what the triple crown of the Pope looks like. And you can see the inscription there. And then right below there, you can see the inscription there, what that inscription means. And it shows substituting for or in place of the Son of God. So, they say that they're turning from God, they're turning to the Pope, who is the representative of the gods that he follows. Okay? And so there you can see a picture of, maybe not. There we go. Of the Pope there wearing that crown. And then we've got those billboards again. So, but Pastor shows here, he says, these billboards are being scattered throughout the South. And he says, we're getting some attention big time. And then he shows the picture of Times Square. Now all we have to do is go to the Prophetic Word magazines, go to the calendar. Go to this year's calendar, and we can see the many different images, of Pastor appearing in Times Square. Bringing this message, bringing out the warning of what sin is bringing. And Pastor shows here, says they're talking about turning this global warming over to the Pope, and Pastor says that he's been trying to figure this out, how it's going to affect the church, and it says the church would have to be in command. Well, this is ultimately what is in the plans is for the, and Malachi Martin mentioned this in the Keys of This Blood, how there's going to be a three-way confrontation between Russia, the United States, and the Pope, and he said that he hoped that the Pope, he looked for the Pope or the Catholic Church to come out on top. Everybody remember the book or the article that was brought out on the real cause of global warming back in June of 2007? Okay. Praise Yahweh. Now, Pastor, he talks about this because there was an article that came out, and it was called The High-Flying Creatures in the Aerosphere. And this article came out, the science of aeroecology, which was a study of these different microorganisms stuff in the atmosphere, in the firmament. Now, remember the book on global warming, or that came out in June of 2007. Well, this Boston University biologist Thomas Kuntz founded aeroecology in 2008. It was after Pastor brought out about the microorganisms in the firmament and how they are sick, that the microorganisms have a job to do, and it's the microorganisms that are actually protecting the earth. And you've got to remember, the earth and the heavens, the earth and the heavens and the planets, they were all made for mankind. They were all made, to assist with mankind in one way or another. And we've got to remember also, just because we might not understand it doesn't make it not true. There's a lot of things that we don't understand. We didn't understand global warming until Pastor brought it out, and now we understand what the cause of that is. We know what the cause of it is, and we know how to put a stop to it. And we have come out from among those practices that are causing this global warming, and we are no longer part of that problem. We are striving to be a part of the solution. And that is what we are all striving to do, to be a living proof of how that we can restore this earth. And this earth is going to be restored after this great nuclear burning takes place. This earth is going to be restored. It's going to take 1,000 years to do it, but it is going to be restored. And we are training, each and every one of us are training for a position in the kingdom, in the government, that is going to help bring that to come to pass. All we have to do is put our nose to the grindstone, put our mind to it, and learn the job, learn the laws that govern that job. That's all we have to do. And time's getting short. Pastor said we need to really be cramming for this exam. Well, again, that time is coming short. As each day passes, our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. It's one feast closer. It's one Sabbath closer. Just because we don't see the end doesn't mean the end isn't getting here. The end's getting here. Okay? And then they shows, that this is also a study between the living. They said that between the interaction between the living and the non-living things. And remember, there's nothing in the earth that is non-living. Everything is made up of some type of living organism, no matter how small it is. These posts, and he points out this post. These steel beams here, they're made up of living microorganisms. And if you could get down small enough, you'd see them vibrating, you'd see them moving. But they're doing their job right now in keeping that beam from hitting the floor. But given certain circumstances, if exposed to the rain, if exposed to certain conditions, then the microorganisms will change. Their job will change, and then you'll begin to see rust. And Pastor points that out. He pointed that out about the walls of Jericho, remember? He said the microorganisms just quit holding everything together at the command that they were given. And they released their hold, and everything just poof. We've seen the examples in the atmosphere of these cloud bursts where all of a sudden the clouds just open up and release all the water. Okay, remember those images? Remember the video that we've seen? It was the same type of thing with the walls of Jericho. The exact same type of thing. Okay, and then there's a lot in here. He talks about the interaction between like a spider web and how a spider web will actually move toward a fly or move toward an insect to actually participate in catching it. And also the same thing with different fungi, with mushrooms. He said they create their own breeze, by releasing moisture with the spores, and what actually creates a tiny convection current. Well, the same scientists here, again, what they've done is they're turning to Pope Francis and the world's religions to save the planet. He says, the same ones that got the planet in this condition are the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church, because it was them. It was them, and it goes all the way back to Cain, who did away with the laws of Yahweh, who said, you don't need to follow these laws. The laws of Yahweh were never done away with, but they convinced others that they didn't have to keep those old laws. But yet it's those laws, it's the submission to those laws that keep everything in order. But a group of scientists are pinning their hopes on the salvation of the planet in the face of climate change and habit change on religion, and appeal from science leaders to religious leaders on environmental protection. And then Pastor, he brings out something he shows here, that in the same time period, starting quite a few years ago, the location of concentration camps in America. If you could tie that in with what I want to show you here, because there's a lot more than meets the eye, then you probably won't hear it. But there's a protection, and he uses that word loosely, protection of the environment that the Pope will come up with, and it's supposed to start next month. Or we're supposed to hear some or start getting some information on this. And of course, it has nothing to do with stopping what's bringing the global warming about. They're saying that it has to do with greenhouse gases and things like this, but the science it's not supported. The scriptures don't support it. They reject the scriptures. And it shows here, it says, because Adam, and it shows here Pope Francis's radical environmentalism. It says, this is what he says. It says, God's declaration in Genesis 3:16, that cursed is the ground because of Adam. Because of Adam, cursed is the ground. And that's the same curse now, that they're still following the same thing that Adam and Eve did, which is practice sin, and it's shown in that same chapter. Remember, Genesis chapter 3. It shows that they rejected the laws of Yahweh. They rejected Yahweh's character. They rejected following the laws of Yahweh and chose to follow the character of the gods, which is doing what was right in their own eyes, pleasing in their own sight, following their own heart, and we see the results of where that has gotten them today. But that's what started this curse, and that's what they're saying. The same sin that Adam did started the curse. And the pastor shows here, he says, the first evil priest, which was Cain, and that was the second tree in the garden, and Yahweh plainly said that there is evil that's the evil of the gods. Okay, that character, that elevation of themselves. I'm looking at me, with that type of attitude, the same characteristic that is shown that Satan herself has. But the Pope is following several gods and lords, and that's the reason the names of Yahweh and Yahshua were taken out of the inspired scriptures with God and Lord. And that's what they're worshiping. The evil gods is plainly shown in Genesis 3:5. Do this and you'll take on their characteristics. And all we have to do is look at what the world practices today in the name of Lord and God, and you can see, you look at the holiday traditions and you can see where they come from. You can see that they're in honor of the various gods, and the practices have nothing to do with righteousness whatsoever, but they tie in with God worship. And in doing that, they're taking on the character of these gods. Let me see where we want to go. Man, time is just flying. Okay. Okay, in verse 26 here, Pastor shows to the environmental justice program formed by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops of 1993. He says, to Pope Francis's comments in his inaugural Mass to let us be protectors of creation, protectors of God's plan inscribed in nature, protectors of one another and of the environment. Okay, now, these are great words, Pastor says, if they would back them up, but that's not what they're up to. They can speak with very, very smooth words and with flatteries. And this is what they do. The churches do it all the time. Now these are great words, but if they would back them up, but that's not what they're out to do. They're out to depopulating the earth of about 5 billion people, as was spoken of earlier, and they've actually documented this, that is their plan. They said that there's too many people for the earth to support. Well, no, there's not too many people for the earth to support. And they try to put in there a sense of urgency, like we have to do this now. Kind of like a pressure salesman will do. When you go in, they say, look, you got to act now, Hey, you're going to miss this opportunity if you don't act now. Only 3 payments of $14.95, or whatever it is. But they play on emotions. The religions. The religions, they play on emotions. The holidays play on emotions. Yahweh says, come, let us reason together, says Yahweh. Compare what's written in the scriptures. Look, let's reason together. Look at what these blessings will bring you and look at what these curses will bring you. You follow these laws, these blessings will come. You break these laws, and then you're going to have these consequences. There's no emotional play there. It's a matter of fact. And this is how we are to make our decisions. We're made to make our decision based on fact, based on law. Stop and think and consider those options. Is it beneficial? Is it going to bring harm? Not, I got to hurry up and do this now. But this is part of what they do. And in order to get people they'll work them up into a frenzy. They get people worked up into a frenzy to where they just react and they don't think. Now, Pope Francis is believed to be putting the final touches on an encyclical about the environment. This move by Pope Francis is also critical. The dialogue about global climate change is presently dominated by the leftists, who also hope to impose draconian measures upon the people that could include, now this is their solution to the global warming. This is what their solution is. rationing, forced birth control, sterilizations, forced sterilizations, abortions, and other measures which are inconsistent with the natural law and the moral teaching of the church is what he says here. He says this has gone now from sin to making up some things on his own, so he takes you slowly from one other thing to try to dodge the word sin from now on. And Pastor, he brings out and shows, oh, by the way, they're totally against the commandments of Yahweh. Well, when you will actually, in the church, it's been documented, that the church has actually removed one commandment, and then realizing that they only had 9 left, had to take another one and split it up into 2 different ones to equal the 10. Okay? But the Pope, he encourages young people to fornicate, elderly people to commit adultery. Yes, he encourages all of this. Go back to those billboards. What were those billboards? What were they promoting? Just go ahead. Do what you want to. See that? There's probably no God. Stop now. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about anything. Just go do whatever you want to do and enjoy yourself. That's what they're trying to push. And many, see here. Pastor shows here, he says there's going to be some things that are going to be used against the people. And part of this psychology here is we're not going to bless you with eternal life unless you join in and do this. They're using the Bible to get his thoughts over, not that they should change and repent of sodomy, fornication, adultery, bestiality, and homosexuality, which are the very acts that are causing these weather-related problems. But they will play on the people's emotions again. We're not going to bless you with eternal life unless you come and join us in doing this. Don't worry about what's written here in the scriptures, but just follow and do what we're telling you to do. Now, and Pastor shows here, he says, now they've actually found bacteria in the firmament. They've actually found bacteria in the firmament that are living. They found living organisms in the heavens. And it's actually this bacteria in the heavens that's floating around the world. They live in the heavens and they make it rain. They're the ones that form the raindrops. They regulate it. They do all kinds of things. Now, there was an article here. This was from CNET. But sea plankton found on the outer surface of the International Space Station. International Space Station orbits the Earth at about 210 miles. They found living plankton on the outside of the space station. Okay? So what's that telling you? What's that telling you? These microorganisms, these things are actually living, and they're able to live in that type of environment. Let me see where we want to go here. And then Pastor, he shows that one of the things that they're going to do, he says he's going to use this global warming as a sin itself, but global warming is not a sin in and of itself. It's the result of sin. But he shows here that the Pope is going to try to use this as a sin itself and start playing the blame game with the different nations that are doing things that they're, that the Pope says is causing this global warming. He says, well, this is sin unless you give up your vehicles here or stop the manufacturing in China. They blame China, so if we stop China from manufacturing, it will stop. And China says, no, we're not going to stop manufacturing. And Taiwan says the same thing. Russia says the same thing. No, we're not going to stop oil from being produced. We're not going to stop these things. And this is how they're going to lead to the formulation and the writing up of these many laws or policies. That's another word that they use for it. They have policymakers. Well, a policy is nothing more than a law. A policymaker, lawmaker, same thing, the same difference. Okay? He's going to try to get some laws passed, and then to govern those laws, he wants what they call the Holy Roman Empire resurrected. And if you remember how the Holy Roman Empire went about, they went forth with a sword in one hand and a cross in the other, saying, you're going to follow this way or we're going to come against you. And we've already seen that with different nations with different cultures that are practicing some forms of righteousness. We see, you see the wars taking place against them, the oppression, trying to get them to, come against. One thing that I've seen here fairly recently is the modest dress. They come against the modest dress, the dressing of women. And they say, well, no, you can't wear that here. You can't wear this. You have to expose yourself. And these people are wanting to practice this. They're wanting to practice this modesty, but yet the laws are coming against any form, any type of practice of that. So this is what we're going to see. This is what we are seeing, and we're going to see it more and more. And now they're saying it's going to be in the domain of the policymakers. And Pastor says here, he says, when you hear words like that, like don't mess with our religion, don't mess with what we're doing. He says, when you hear words like that, you can know for sure that pressure is being put on them from a source that's not being advertised on the news. Why would you say don't mess with our religion unless somebody's starting to mess with it? Okay, that's what's going on. So the pressure is there, and it's going to start becoming stronger and stronger with the fear of this fear of global warming. And then Pastor shows again about the Crusades, and about how they came against any of those who would follow any form of righteousness. And it could very well be that anyone who will come against the Pope and what he says is causing global warming and the ways that he would want to deal with that is going to come under attack. So this, we could very well be seeing this here in the not too distant future. And Pastor shows here, and again, he shows that this is the resurrection of this Holy Roman Empire. And then he says the Catholic Church, the article here shows Pope Francis is currently finalizing a much anticipated papal encyclical on the environment, and the Catholic Church is expected to lead. The Catholic Church expected to lead the charge, lead like an army, lead to limit global warming. And then Pastor shows here, he says, if you turn over to Revelation 17, and then you see that. Now, in this chapter, you notice it fully describes the leader of the kings of the earth. And they've asked him to lead this charge so you can put it together with the scripture, the prophecy that tells you where this charge is coming from and who's leading it. It's not Yahweh. He turned it over to man. He's saying, I will not interfere with any more of this. I'll let man go his own way over here, and I will show you how the end will be. Now, this will be the final test of what sin brings. It's going to be the ultimate result. We're going to see the burning, this nuclear burning, and the destruction of 4/5 of the earth's population. There's no telling how much trouble sin has brought, Pastor shows, and how many planets have been destroyed in the universe because of the beings they're practicing sin. He says it's become such a leviathan, it's such a monster. It's become such a leviathan in the universe that the only way to stop this is to prove you do this, and you volunteer to stop this, or dying you will die, and you will never be a part of the universe anymore. Follow my ways, follow my laws, Yahweh says, and this will all stop. And it's the only way. There's no other way that there's no other solutions for what we see in the world today. All of this misery, death, and this global warming, there's no other solution other than the complete submission to Yahweh's laws. So with that, men, may Yahweh be with you and bless you. If everyone will stand, I'm going to turn the class over to the great Kohan, Kiefer Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. And welcome to the great House of Yahweh. Welcome to the Sabbath that is going to begin a great and awesome feast. Praise Yahweh. It's an awesome thing to be here. It seems like there's so many things that try to get in the way between us getting here, and it's truly a remarkable thing that Yahweh allowed us to be here, and we can rejoice in this. This is going to be the best feast ever. Praise Yahweh. If we're going to turn to page 25 and continue on in this sermon. In verse 55, and I'll ask the question before we get started. Why do we put our trust in the Scriptures? Praise Yahweh. We're going to answer that in this sermon, but be thinking about that, because it's very important that we do have our trust in these scriptures. So why is this? Why is this? In Revelation 17:1, this is in verse 55. Revelation 17:1, and there came one of the seven Malachim who had the seven bowls. And you've got the seven lights here. There are seven bowls of light. They represent the seven works of Yahweh. And where the last work on the seventh lampstand, we are that last work. And that had the bowls on top that contain the oil from the tree. That is the tree of life. And yes, and talked with me, saying to me, come, and I will show you the sentence of this great whore. Now this is how she turns out. This is Yahweh predicting the ending of this great whore. And notice it's a woman he's speaking of here, a great whore that sits. She sits a lot. Doesn't ever give up. Doesn't ever get up. No, that word sits, it means to judge. And if you look it up, this whore has authority. And Pastor goes on to describe in the next verses here how, just like in a courtroom, when you go to a courtroom, the judge has authority over that courtroom. And whatever he or she says in that courtroom is binding, and you better believe it is, Otherwise, you end up getting fined, getting carried out, getting thrown in jail, whatever that judge says, that's what is going to be carried out. Well, it's the same thing here. This whore has authority over the kings of the earth. And in verse 57, he says, well, in verse 15, if you look at it, many waters, that is the many people, the peoples, nations, multitudes, and languages, that is the waters that she judges. And she has been given authority. The Roman Catholic Church has been given authority over the nations right now. Now, there's some holiness coming from certain religions out there. And there is a certain resistance to the things that this whore is pushing. They're not all falling directly in line with everything she says. So, yes, there is some holiness. However, they know that they won't worship Mary. They know that would be the end of their lives if they did. They won't follow the West, knowing that the West has lowered the moral standards. You hear this a lot coming out of these Eastern religions, and particularly the ones that didn't join with the 10 there. The Eastern Orthodox, this is one of the things that they tend to all agree on, was that they didn't want to follow the Western standards. That they were very much against some of the things that were taught. And when they say West, they're speaking of this great whore and the teachings that come forth from it. All right, and the lifestyle that was created from it, the lifestyle that we see here in the United States. This is what they don't want to see take place with their country. Now, they don't follow all the laws of Yahweh. They do follow, some. They practice maybe some. They don't have all of Yahweh's laws, and they're not the house of Yahweh. And I've told you before, if you're not the house of Yahweh, you have no protection. So that's a warning to the world, and it's a warning to us, that we need to stay connected to the house of Yahweh. We don't want to do anything to remove us from the position that Yahweh's called us here to receive, because without this connection, if we are not part of the house of Yahweh in word and in deed and in action, we don't have that protection. And you're going to see how awfully important this protection is as this continues to play out. You can surely see, through many of the news articles that are coming out these days that they're not really on the verge of breaking out into peace anytime soon. That any part of the globe is like a potential hot spot for a nuclear war. It's not just in Syria. It's everywhere. They're really, really pushing this thing, and that's just one aspect of it. That's just war. You think about the diseases. You think about the riots. You think about, like the great prophet Amos said, the great tumults that you look upon the earth and you see and know that Yahweh prepared a place for his people to protect them. Okay, but that protection is, it depends on us. It's conditioned. It's upon certain conditions that we have to meet. If you turn to page 26 and look at verse 63, verse 2, the kings of the earth have committed fornication. That is, they practice the practice of their religion, the practice idolatry, God worship. Evil like the gods, and that's just what the Pope got through saying. That's what that was. They worship this evil god, and surely you can read Genesis 3:5. But Pope Francis and see that these are evil gods that they're following, and the inhabitants of the earth. That's the multitudes, the nations, the tongues, the languages, have been made drunk. And of course, drunk means to be confused. If you've ever seen somebody drunk, you know that they don't have all their mental faculties at work. But it's a great way to put it. They're confused. They're groping in the dark for an answer, and all of their answers don't make any sense. That's this drunkenness that has gone through, to the earth, because it comes forth from their teaching, as we see in verse 64. They've been confused with the wine. Now, the wine means teaching. Christianity is a confusing teaching. Even if you try to make sense of it, it's a very confusing teaching. Any aspect of it, if you try to really hone in on it and try to understand it, it's confusing at best. And that's just trying to make sense of it. Now, when a person practices Christianity, they let this guard down. They let everything that would protect an individual. All the health laws that Yahweh gives us. When a person practices Christianity, you push aside all that health law, all the feasts, anything that would connect you with Yahweh, and it creates this confusion in the mind. And that's exactly what is being described here in the book of Revelation. He said the wine means the teaching. Don't hurt the oil. Don't hurt the wine. Don't hurt our lifestyle. Don't try to change our religion. Don't try to take away our oil supply. What could be plainer than that? That's exactly what they're saying right now. And if you bring up the laws of Yahweh anywhere, you're going to be met with that attitude. We don't have to. I can't practice that. Surely I couldn't take a whole week off of work, Well, the laws of Yahweh is what gives us our great wisdom and understanding. When we practice, when we do these things, we gain this understanding that the world just doesn't have. And you could see that all of their groping is caused by them casting aside these very laws. So he says, so he carried me away into the spirit, into the midst of God worshippers of Elohim, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast. And of course, this is the great whore that you see in verse 1. Come and I will show you the sentence of that great whore. Well, this great whore is the woman that you see in verse 3, the great whore. So he carried me away into the spirit, into the midst he carried me away in the spirit, into the midst of God worshippers of Elohim, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-covered beast. Well, this beast is shown in Daniel now. Remember, there were 4 of them. And this really becomes important for us to understand this history here, especially when we see, the certain prophecies that have been brought to light, recently concerning these 10 kings. He talks a little bit about the history there of Alexander and so forth, and we're going to skip down to verse 69. He says, now that should tell you something about keeping loyalty, and that's the big point that Yahweh wants to show each of you. that you can depend on His Word. Remember that the question that I asked in the beginning, why is it? Why is it that we put our trust in these Holy Scriptures? We can depend on His Word. It's going to be vitally important that we all have that same understanding. That we all learn to totally depend on the instructions that Yahweh gives us. Because this is going to get a little out of control. Or a lot out of control. But Yahweh brought us here and prepared us for this job. We don't have to be scared. We just have to be obedient. The world has many things to fear. We shouldn't have that fear here in the house of Yahweh. We just need to be obedient, and if we don't understand something, pray about it, ask your counselors, but don't worry about, don't try to wrestle with Yahweh, because you've been brought to this house to prepare for what's coming and to prepare for an eternal position in Yahweh's kingdom, and we can very easily throw it all away if we reject any of the instructions that Yahweh gives us. And it's very important to learn to build this trust in Yahweh, because we know that everything He says is absolutely dependable. We can rely on everything Yahweh tells us. So how do we know that? Well, how do we know that this was inspired and it comes from heaven? How do we know? How do we know that Yeshua came from heaven? Oh, well, the Christians know. They saw Jesus coming down. Boy, that crazy, idiotic stuff. And that's exactly what it is. It's crazy, idiotic stuff. But that's what you get from the unbelievers. Everything that they try to describe the Scriptures is a lie. That they do it to pervert the pure message that comes from the book of Yahweh. In verse 70, he says, well, this was the Spirit given to you in Yachanan 6:63. The laws. Yeshua kept the laws from heaven. Now the laws came from heaven, and Yeshua kept them and upheld them and was willing to die. Actually willing to die, because He believed it so much that He was willing to give His life to pay for your sins. And that's the reason that we are here today. Praise Yahweh. Now, in verse 71, he says, and by this same Spirit that you see and you read here in His laws, this spirit of unity. Don't think that just because the Day of Atonement is over that we don't need to be thinking upon this unity anymore. This is always, the great Kohen Levi, as he was speaking, he said, you could give 1,000 sermons on this subject. And truly, every subject in the Holy Scriptures ties into this concept of unity, because that is exactly what Yahweh called us here to do, to come into unity with Him. It's what it's all about. It's the big picture here, and it's these laws that is the spirit of unity. Because if you and I can agree on these set of laws, we're going to agree on the decision. Whether it is, for me or against me, doesn't matter. It's for the laws of Yahweh. And we know that the laws of Yahweh are of a benefit to all of us. They're not singled out for individuals. They're not for gaining advantage one person over another. They're pure laws that benefit everybody. And as a community, we need to accept that and to agree upon that. Here in the house of Yahweh, we should never have instances where we are fighting against the judgment of Yahweh. These are His laws, and these are the laws that we're going to uphold forever. So all of us can agree that fornication is wrong, surely. All of us can agree that these sins are causing the damage, not the automobiles. It's very clever war that they're waging there. And, speaking of that climate agreement, I don't know how many caught that. Yeah, they just recently got enough countries in support to where they can actually implement it now. And that should go into effect on the 4th of November. So now they have enough people that have signed onto it. They say now it's law, and we can start waging war with this climate thing. Who knows what they're going to try to come up with. But we do know, because Pastor warned us years and years ago, what this climate deal was all about from the beginning. They didn't fool the 1 cent, not for a second. The minute they started talking about it, he knew exactly what it was about. Think about that knowledge. Think about that wisdom. That's the wisdom that you gain from believing Yahweh. And that's the knowledge and wisdom that we all should attain here at the great house of Yahweh. We should all be in unity. Now, in verse 72, this woman, I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-covered beast. And he says, now that is and was the Holy Roman Empire. He says it didn't fade, it was just divided. It's not gone. You know what those 10 kings call themselves? Catholics. You know what the other 4 that didn't go call themselves? Catholics. It was never this Roman Empire. It never went anywhere. It was just divided. It still has the same laws. They still, the policemen still have the same badges showing the Roman shield. It's incredible how much people don't know history. They overlook all these things. And of course, it's because they don't have somebody there teaching us. We did the same thing in the world. We might have understood a thing or two, but we don't understand all of it until Yahweh brought us here and taught us. So in verse 73, now this woman, the woman that's doing this judging and sending out this Santa Claus to tell people and to tell the people and to play a show and to make out like he's leading the world. And, he's actually carrying orders. He's a man that takes orders from the Vatican, talking about Pope Francis, and takes them to the nations and says, this is what you're going to do. And remember what he, when he met with President Putin, remember what he told him, you need to do something about the Ukraine, the situation there. Remember what Putin said to him, don't mess with our religion. If you understood a little bit of the Eastern Orthodox, and the Ukraine was more or less the birthplace of the Russian Orthodox Church. Right now, the Russian Patriarch has the authority overseeing of that region, but that could very easily, and they've been trying to break loose of that. This is going to create a very, very difficult situation there. And these schisms, they claim unity. These kings of the East, they all claim unity. There is absolutely no unity, within them whatsoever. I remember watching this thing unfold, and the silly things, before they came to that meeting, the Great and Holy Council, there was concerns that who's going to sit where at the table. They said, well, I'm not going because if the table's not round, it'll look like somebody's in charge, and nobody should be in charge. This is the kind of idiotic things that they were arguing about, But to say that, now they've proclaimed unity. There's no unity with that group. There's no unity with anybody who doesn't practice the laws that bring unity. It's just that simple. You can't have unity and reject Yahweh. Yahweh is unity. Remember, hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our Father, Yahweh is one. And upon this rock, Yahweh, unity, he will build his house. We are that house. We're here right now testifying to the world that there is no other way to attain peace. You're not going to have it. In verse 77, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Now this shows you that this woman that's judging the world right now is putting out, if you'll just read it, the abominations that are shown to you in Leviticus 18. Abominations. That is the filth of the earth. Remember, the sins have reached unto heaven. And if you turn to page 28, And you see that little excerpt from the prophetic word of June 2007. The true cause of global warming. Well, in verse 79, the mother of harlots, that's Christianity. The preachers that follow the Catholic Church, that are keeping Sunday, their only authority for keeping Sunday is the Vatican. Think about it. You know, where did this teaching come from? Where did this wine come from? Where did you get that bottle of wine that you're using every Sunday? All these churches. Well, I'm not a Catholic. I'm a First Presbyterian or a Lutheran or whatever it is. You know, you're all going to church on Sunday. Where did you get that? You didn't get it from the Scriptures. You know, so where did you get it? It came from the city that sits on 7 hills. It came from the whore. And that's the only authority there was. He said, and you'll worship on this day, and you will worship this god, Constantine. Now, back in the days of Constantine and the abominations of the earth, the abominations, now that's shown specifically by the prophets in Leviticus 18. He shows them in other places in Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments. Seems like I've seen that somewhere recently. Couldn't put my finger on it. Yeah, kind of a right jumps out at you. Huh? I thought that was truly a remarkable thing to witness this sign going up. You know, because you know I know our local town folks, you know, probably don't think the world of us. They never have. You know, but someday they're going to realize, you know, what a blessing is right here in front of them, and has been living by them side by side, you know, every day, not stealing their things, you know, being honest, working for them, you know, not stealing time, you know, all the various things that we practice when we're amongst the worldly people. You know, people take note of that. They really do. You know, even the most staunch and diehard Christians have to always admit, you know, well, at least I know I could trust you guys. You know, here's the key to my house or whatever. You know, we gain that trust not because we go and tell them, hey, I'm from the House of Yahweh. Let me tell you what you're doing wrong in your house. You know, let me correct you on everything that you're doing in your house. No, we show it by our actions. Remember, we're living examples of the laws of Yahweh. So when we go out in the world and we don't practice the laws of Yahweh, all right, we're no longer representing Yahweh's kingdom, but we're blaspheming Yahweh's kingdom because we're saying that I'm a part of the kingdom of heaven, I'm a part of the house of Yahweh, but I'm out here, you know, stealing a little bit, you know, or doing whatever it is. You know, whatever it is that you know that as being members of the house of Yahweh that you shouldn't do. You know, we have to really, really be on guard of that. Yahweh's not going to, you know, reward us for bringing dishonor upon his name and his house. You know, and that there's no reason to. We got plenty of help trying to do that. You know, what we have to do is to be obedient and be these shining examples of what a citizen of the kingdom of heaven is like. You know, peaceable, not striving, not being at war. Well, in verse 83, he says, well, if you read that closely in Revelation 18:24, this woman is going to be destroyed, as you see, with this nuclear burning in the first part. Well, and her sins have reached unto the heavens. Her sins. Now, what part of sin could reach into the heaven? Well, Pastor explained this very, very thoroughly in this prophetic word. If you haven't read it, you need to read it, and you need to rehearse it if you've read it. You know, because he explains how all these things come about. And he explains the true cause of global warming. You know, the world doesn't try to bring this up in their meetings, you know, but they'll talk about carbon. You know, we got to stop We got to stop carbon. So let's everybody fly our jets to this place so we can have a meeting. Everybody from around the world, fly your jets over here. And we'll stop carbon, you know. It's ridiculous. Nobody looks at it logically like that, though. You know, they're all, oh yeah, we got to do something. You know, hurricanes are bad, so let's do something to fight hurricanes. Let's all get electric cars. Well, that's not going to help. It wasn't the electric cars. I mean, it wasn't the gas guzzling car that put the sins into heaven. You know, it's not how it works. In verse 84. Well, go back to Revelation 18:24. Now, knowing that this woman here is going to be destroyed by the system she actually created, starting with Adam and Eve, and like Cain, their first preacher, this system is going to be destroyed. And then on over to verse 24, it says, and in her, that is this city, Revelation 17:18, the woman you saw is that great city, the Vatican. It reigns over the kings of the earth. And the Pope is their Santa Claus. That is supposed to go out and look heavenly. And, you know, if you think about it, everybody's been trained to accept this. Everybody in the world, in the United States, you know, they've been trained to accept that this jolly man who goes around and, oh, you know, Merry Christmas, you know. Well, that's who they've been trained to accept. It's the same image that this one's going around, except for he's just saying slightly different words, you know. But he says that too. Well, he has just talked about, he says, just came from heaven being pulled in the sleigh by some reindeer. And he has just talked to the twins that have fallen out from heaven. Of course, those are the ones that founded Rome. And, you know, and no, there ain't no God, as the billboards say. You know, there's plenty of billboards that try to tell you different. Of course, our billboard tells the truth. It's an oaky billboard, you know. In page 30, I want to get to a couple things before we close here. Page 30 in verse 92. Could you stand up under that pressure? Now, this is what we need to understand. We need to stand up under this pressure. Well, what else? Is there another alternative? No way. You know you're dead unless Yahweh protects you. And there will be 2 billion people who Yahweh will protect. And to answer our first question, let's just go ahead and turn to page 32 real quick. And verse 112, to answer the first question that we asked when we began, he says, the only thing there is to do is to educate them in the way of Yahweh. And I was going to answer the question. I've answered it 1,000,000 times, but why do we trust in the Scriptures? Because of the prophecies. Not one of these shall fail. Not one of them. Praise Yahweh. This is going to be a great feast.